Joining me on the broadcast is WION's correspondent Jessica Taneja. She joins us from the Supreme Court of India. Good afternoon, Jessica. What's the latest you have on this case, the hearing of which was there in the Supreme Court today?
Well, as you mentioned, the case has been now adjourned to the 14th of March. Earlier there was, of course, confusion whether it would be earlier, but the CJI agreed to listen to the lawyers and they sought more time because, Raghavendra, the parties say that they need more time for documentations to be presented. Remember, there were as many as 9,000 exhibits that were supposed to be translated, and the report submitted by the Additional Solicitor General today said that there are as many as 504 exhibits and 20 other religious books that also need to be presented as evidences and exhibits, but they have been translated. He said the total deposition, in fact, concludes to 827 witnesses which have been filed in the Apex Court, but the Apex Court and the CJI have allowed more time to the various parties to put in all the documentation that is required for this particular issue to be heard on the next date.
Also, Jessica, we have already seen a considerable delay. This case was first listed to be heard before the Apex Court in the first week of December. On that day, the hearing was postponed to the 8th of February, which is today. And now another delay. Are we likely to see further delays in these hearings?
Well, Raghavendra, it's absolutely something that we cannot say because, you know, depending on the time that it has taken for so long for this case to even reach the Apex Court after the Allahabad High Court verdict, if you recall that it had distributed the land between the three parties equally, and after that hasn't been settled, and the Apex Court is only trying to do its best here and trying to satisfy all the parties involved because there's so many interveners, there's so many intervention applications and petitioners involved in this. It makes the case even more complex. Also, there were talks about having sent this matter to a larger bench, rather not limited to a 3-judge bench, which is hearing the matter now, but put it forward in front of at least a 7-judge bench who could decide on this matter. But the matter hasn't been taken yet to that extent. But what the court is showing is complete urgency on how they want to conclude this within the given span of time. But again, Raghavendra, it's very difficult to point out on how the procedure would go on from here on because this matter involves a lot of complexity. It is not just only about the parties as well as the petitioners. It's also about the kind of exhibits that are involved. If you recall, just last year when the case was being heard by the current CJI, who was in court number 2, when he got the matter first, he said that there are so many exhibits. In fact, there was a 1-hour confusion to understand which documentation is relevant and which is not, which needs to be translated and which can't be translated, because documentation was in Persian, was in various other languages, but translation seemed like a possible difficulty. But at this point in time, the order that was passed then the documentation was ready, and the whole point and the whole case is in fact halted at just the fact that the documentation is not there. And if the documentation is not complete, the court, of course, cannot proceed in the matter.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jessica Taneja, for joining us with those updates.